Hey guys, how's it going? I'm the Duke of Italy, your favorite lo-fi music YouTuber. And today we are starting something I should have started a long time ago. This is the ISIS Discography review. And if you're wondering what the heck this band is, this is a huge sludge and post-metal band from the 2000s and also the late 90s going up until I think about 2010 when they were just done. Now, while they were a pretty short-lived band, they had a very unique take on post-metal, a very unique take on sludge metal, a lot of post-rock influence everywhere, a very amazing, lush sound, a very deeply conceptual sound that was really hard to understand. It takes a whole lot of time to just dive into the concept of all these albums and to really understand the things that they're singing about. It's also a band that went through tons of stylistic changes. While always remaining in sludge metal, they went from more of a sludge metalcore style all the way until like post-metal straight up with a really huge post-rock territory. And then they got a little bit groovy and progressive on their last albums, and they made a really special, lasting impact. And they did something a lot of bands don't do. They made their last album, they did one more split, and they said, you know what? We're done. We love making music. They still make music, just not as ISIS. They said, you know what? ISIS has done everything they need to. And I love how much they kept it to be themselves. And they reunited for one single concert like years later for like a benefit for something. But their legacy is truly pretty much untouchable. As you'll see in the quality I talk about in this video, they are one of those bands that is just so consistent, so great. They're a band that rarely does anything wrong. And if they do something wrong, the band will kind of let you know about it. Now, how I'm going to review this stuff here, I typically do it in order, but today I am going to change it just a little bit. I'm going to include the demo, which is the first thing they do when we talk about the release Red Sea, which is an EP. Because the demo wasn't really widely released, it was kind of hard to find. And it's a demo. A promotional demo feels like it's not meant to be heard by that many people. It's not like black metal where a demo is like a release of an actual sort. It's very much a demo, and they use the material later and they kind of refined it for production reasons. But what we actually have as the first real ISIS release is the Mosquito Control EP. This is one that is not on streaming except for Bandcamp, and it's a real shame because you'll find that as a look at early ISIS, it doesn't get any better than this. It is an EP, but it is about a half hour in length, so I'd say you get a good full-length set of listening here. It feels very complete. It's brief with just 4 songs, and the sound is extremely intense. Now, this album, you begin with the track called Poison Eggs. Now, the first thing you notice with this track is the bottom end is just immense. It sounds huge, and the bass is really punchy. It's got a nice, unique tone, and the guitar is angular. It's got sort of a post-hardcore style of playing here that works really, really well. And texturally, especially for the time, it is so advanced. It is so dense and heavy, and it's actually pretty detailed. And it's tense. It is absolutely tense. The amount of tension here is ridiculous. You feel like it's gripping you super tightly. And even though these guys are from Boston, the vocals have a real old-fashioned Southern style of like raspy, harsh vocals. A little bit like I Hate God or like the NOLA scene, but it's so aggressive. And it builds quickly. You know, their post-rock tendencies aren't here yet, but it builds into this surging, destructive song. And it's slow, but it is aggressive for 5 minutes straight without a second of boredom. Lyrically, for this EP here and for a little bit later, we get themes of insects and misanthropy and sort of using the imagery of swamps and insects and being bitten and like just bugs and all this gross stuff. It's really used as sort of a metaphor for people. So it is a very misanthropic, very aggressive sound. And when it goes into Life Under the Swatter, this continues with a really nice 6/8 rhythm. And it sounds just furious. It sounds a lot more like Neurosis than what ISIS would end up as, which is really interesting because ISIS is very different from Neurosis. Even though they're both the sludge post-metal route, ISIS is a lot more beautiful. Neurosis really doubled down on the aggression. And it's pretty fast here as well. And there's so much bass, it's insane. You got a really surging, like chugging sound, like those really guttural death metal chugs, like the palm muting. It's so heavy. And it's got this really big reprieve that is still tense, but a little bit more spacey before we basically get what ISIS's take on a breakdown might be. And breakdowns for me in music, they're a little tough because there's so many bands, especially in the beatdown hardcore genre, and especially of slam, which slam is just a constant breakdown. It's not a bunch of breakdowns. It's like, here's one breakdown. Here you get something so furious. It feels so just brutal. It's a little bit like disturbing with how aggressive you feel here. And this song is hateful. It's utterly hateful. And this leads us into the track known as Hive Destruction. And as it starts, it is just disgusting. And it slows down further and further until this stoner doom crawl, which is just scraping away. It's got this metalcore style of dissonance, but it's pinpointed to be as angry as possible. And it doesn't just feel like random dissonance for no reason. It is really, really heavy. And it's furious stuff. As slow as it is, it's just the most violent sound. And this leads us into the giant track known as Relocation Swarm. While the whole EP so far has been about a mutual suffering under a swarm of bugs, here it kind of doubles down, it changes a little bit. So it has this sort of reprieve and a really quick build before you get this immense krautrock-esque jam. And it is immensely gritty. It's like you actually are going to give yourself like a need for a root canal if you listen to this thing and you just clench your teeth as hard as it makes you. The post-rock build here is one of the best in ISIS's discography, and funnily enough, it's not even in the part of their albums where they do this yet. It's just angry stuff. It builds and surges and surges. And it's repetitive, but it's so satisfying. It ends in this really thick noise wall. And after this giant long jam, it is very satisfying stuff. And after all 11 and a half minutes of that, you just feel distraught after that whole thing. This is one of those, I mean, it's kind of an album. It's an EP. It's one of those releases that you just feel weary after. You feel so like just gassed, like it takes everything out of you. It's that intense. It's a hell of an opening for a band, and honestly, it's one of their best releases. This, for me, this gets based in Red Pill. So getting into this band, I knew their later stuff before this one, just a little side note, and never would I think this band would ever get so angry. And if you look retrospectively from this band, this is a shocking change into what they would become. Like, this is so heavy. It's kind of shocking. And the next release we get, which is not long after, is considered unofficial by the band now. They have sort of redacted what they deem to be the official status of this EP, and I can't really blame them. This is the Sawblade EP. It's kind of a cool little release here. It's kind of rare, but it is not considered official anymore. But at the time of release, it was considered official. And it is just 3 songs, and 2 of them are covers. The first one being Emission of the Signal. And it's a shorter track of just under 5 minutes, which for this band, it gets pretty short. And it's dominated by this really intense, pulsating bass riff. It's one half of these really percussive textures and one half of this single note pulsating. It's really interesting. And that's basically it for the track. It's this really psychedelic, mesmerizing yet surging, powerful track here that's really, really cool, and it is the best track on the EP, but not songwriting wise, because the other 2 tracks here were technically written very well. The next track is Street Cleaner, the Godflesh song. It is a cover. It's got kind of a grungy Alice in Chains feeling for the cover, and it runs way too long. The way they do it here is just really disappointing. The bass really dominates here, and the really stiff snare hits let the guitar usher in some really crazy textures. And next we get a favorite song of mine, Hand of Doom by Black Sabbath, except it's the ISIS cover, so what could be so good about it? Aaron from ISIS, his clean singing is not meant to be like Ozzy Osbourne singing. It's not the same style, but he tries here, and it is really lo-fi. The low fidelity is a real hindrance on this track, because the original you need the space to breathe, and here you just have bad production. The vocals have like a weird low pass filter on them that just it doesn't work, and it extends the end of the song with a really long solo, but it comes off as uninspired. It's not a fun addition. And next we get a song that is actually, they've named things after. This is House of Low Culture. In a way, it's kind of the reason to listen to this thing. It's 11 minutes long. It is lo-fi drone metal. I don't know why ISIS was doing that. They didn't need to, but here it is. It's like if the track Emission of the Signal was slowed way down for some reason. I think the last 3 minutes have some interesting texture, but overall it is not a very fulfilling nor that heavy of a drone metal song. It feels just kind of there. But I didn't think I'd be saying this for a ISIS review, but I give this one a Sneed. I actually had to look back at my rating system to find what I give this thing because I just didn't expect it so much. But yeah, this was a really disappointing release here. You can really tell why ISIS didn't care to bring it back. It's or refer to it as a Regal release at all. The covers are kind of uninspired. The production is weak. The drone metal section is kind of doesn't make any sense, and it feels like they're just trying to do post rock, but they weren't that inspired for it. There's not really a reason for any of these songs to return, but these songs do show up in many other instances for some reason. And the next release we get is the third ISIS EP, The Red Sea, which tacked onto the end is the demo material. And the demo material I'm just going to discuss quickly because they never brought any of it back. They probably used ideas from it, but it was something that was largely to be ignored. It's raw, it's sludgy, kind of filthy, pretty metalcore. It's a very even blend of sludge metal and metalcore. And it's a lot more tame, but it's not necessarily all that bad. It's just kind of, you can really tell this is a band that like wasn't ready for, I guess, the big leagues. I mean, it's not really terrible material. If you're into metalcore more than I am, then maybe you'd like their demo material, but it's not for me. But the Red Sea, you get a pretty interesting, again, metalcore, sludge metal split here, kind of akin to their demo material, but not as good as Mosquito Control. Not that it's bad, it's actually quite good. First, we get, let me read this, Charmic Cat Shines to Earth. And this track's just beautiful. You start with a screeching wall of feedback with the sludge coated intro. And it is an absolutely filthy sounding track. It's borderline power electronics at points. It is mostly an intro. This wall of feedback and the slow riff that plods on after is basically what dominates it, but it is so stupidly hateful. You really are getting that like Mosquito Control type of vibe here, but it's just so unforgiving. And many people don't like this track, but I think you're weak for that. Like this is the track that is the most sludgy on the album, and yet for some reason people don't like it. It is a good piece of post metal. Post metal is what it is. They just don't like its unique take on post metal, really. But I think it's just fantastic. I think it's a really underrated track. And this is when we get the minus times after. You get some really heavy, sludgy metalcore. It's like a really interesting mix of like power violence style riffs. It's a really interesting combo of like death metal riffs and power violence, everything else. Like the vocals are like a little bit grindy, very power violence, just like punching really hard. And then the riffs are just super down-tuned, kind of groovy. It's really interesting, honestly. And it features a really nice sludgy build before you get like this really intense breakdown. And this is all goes right before we're back into this really heavy assault. It works pretty much seamlessly. And it is very angry. And there are also some really incredible riffs towards the end. And then we go into the track Red Sea. And this is a dip into the atmospheric sludge sound that we know and love with a crawling pace. We get some really nice metalcore style dissonant chords. This song really feels like I Hate God, but more atmospheric, which I think is really cool. And the thick clanging bass sounds really sick. And this song is literally about opioid addiction. So, you know, that sludgy atmosphere is just, you feel it. And the atmospheric sludge style here is really cool because after 4 minutes, it gets really heavy before you go into a post-rock style build, which the band, while they had dips into krautrock and a little bit of post-metal with like more of a repetitive ambient style here, or even drone metal at points, now you get the compositional repetitive build with something simple and something really, really cool. And then you hit with one of their trademark climaxes like their most well-known material, and it sounds sublime. And that's the EP here. It's really cool stuff. It's a really cool thing before what they're about to get into. I think the metalcore nods aren't as great as they were on Mosquito Control. They're better than they were on the demo, but I think they still had a bit of a ways to go before they reached the true amazing ISIS sound. But what they had here was like so close to something really cool. It's like they're just about to be something really fully realized, and it's awesome. This gets to come to Brazil for me. And after this, we get the ISIS/Pig Destroyer split, of all things, which for ISIS, it has the Street Cleaner cover, which is absolutely fine. And Pig Destroyer covers Carcass, of all bands. Carcass is a band I haven't really mentioned much on this channel. I will be mentioning them a bit soon, but Pig Destroyer is a great band, and Carcass is a great band too for all of their stuff. I think in terms of gore grind, they're way better than any other band. And it's not much different from normal Carcass. Like the I don't know why you would cover Carcass. It feels like you don't really have to on those earlier tracks. I mean, I couldn't imagine covering any gore grind myself. I would just write a whole new song. But it's not that different, but it's kind of pleasing, I guess. I don't really feel like rating that release. If you want to hear some covers, it's a collector's piece for either band, basically. And this, finally, we are led into the first full-length ISIS album, Celestial, which is these concepts of building towers, and the towers are the main set of imagery here. And conceptually, it is not the most amazing thing ISIS will ever do, but it sounds pretty cool. And first thing I want to mention before I get anywhere further, the remaster of this album sounds a little bit warmer than the original, but the original is not amazingly produced. I feel like this album could be taken to a better area. Like, I feel like it could be a better album if it was just produced better. It's the first album of theirs so far, release rather, because the other stuff are EPs, that really is given a detriment from their production. And they used to be kind of low fidelity, but it worked. It didn't work on Sawblade, but hey. But Celestial is covered with all these intermission tracks called Signal with a number, and it starts off with Signal 01. It is a 55-second intro of some light synthesizer and some radar signal until we go into Celestial, the Tower. It is monolithic, almost 10 minutes in length. And there is a huge 2-note guitar intro, which consists of these giant chugs. And it is very meditative. The second guitar almost sounds like another bass with how much low end there is and how resonant it sounds. And halfway through, we get a new melody that sort of clashes against this more lumbering chug sound, which is just an amazing little writing nod. And the lyrics reflect suffocation, not the band, but the biological process. And it really reflects the vibe of the song as a whole. In a minute after the huge chugs, it all pulls back for the synths to really lay the groundwork before a huge ISIS build that we all know and love if you know their later material. And this really shows that ISIS is finally here. It shows that, like, they now know how to write, just not as much like produce. And this goes into the track Glisten. And if the Tower didn't feel like sludge metal at all, this track sure does. It's got this burning, seething rage that dips into this real metalcore territory with the really dissonant build. And it has this really nice effect given to the kick drum. It's like really, really heavy. It's like this set of distortion that just sounds perfect. And it is gripping how metalcore is thrown into this track here without being too obnoxious. And it goes way beyond the scope of every genre involved here. It's actually an incredibly an interesting way to write a song. You've got these rambling, insane vocals as the aura of the song just like slowly swells. It's so brooding, and it's writing off of this one just immense riff. It sounds fantastic. Next we get Swarm Rains Down, and you get these distorted vocals that are just as furious as they could ever be. And it's paired with these really excellent riffs that start syncopating on the response. And the synths start leaking in when it goes back into like this really new build. It's really interesting. And the sound of this track is absolutely punishing, which you were relieved to find another Signal track following this, which goes into the super heavy deconstructing towers. But it's also really trance-like. It's almost Anima type of production here. And it's very much like Tool with the grooviness of this track. Feels a bit like Mastodon, feels a bit like Anima. It's got these really percussive bass rhythms that sound excellent. And you get these giant hits that are just swamped in feedback. The production of this, while like the mastering here isn't great, like the production nods are really interesting, I can at least say. And then you get this noise that just floods the track where everything starts slowing down, which is really interesting. Before it all goes into another Signal interlude. This goes into one of my favorite tracks on the album, Collapse and Crash. It's definitely got the best intro to any track on the album. It is as violent as the album can get, and it is just so bitter even when it starts a little subdued. And it's funny because it contrasts with the most beautiful melodic part on the whole album. And what's nice about this track is that there's not that much to say about it because it just starts surging. It feels so incredibly powerful, and it hypnotizes you in this wall of riffs that just rolls and rolls over itself. It's really interesting. It's my kind of post-metal song. And this takes us into CFT, which has a really awesome, somber intro. It is definitely the softest track here, but it is brimming with energy. It is basically just a normal post-rock song here, which I find to be a really nice contrast on the album. It's got a laid-back palette with all the tension that the album has included so far. It's definitely some stuff we'll see on albums like Oceanic. It's a really interesting track. But this goes into the best song on the album, Gentle Time. It is utterly devastating distortion, followed by some sort of semi-harsh vocals here. It's like modern sort of melodic metalcore singing, and this is the point where the production gets its heaviest. It really lets the track breathe. The chugs get so heavy, it's like Mortician levels of heavy, and it is not gentle. The main riff is absolutely killer. It makes you actually want to throw people, but the way it just engages you and it surges forward, and it burns. It is burning. It is not gentle at all, which I'm guessing is a little bit of humor in that title there, but it is utterly a devastating track. And this goes into signal 4 end transmission, and then you're just laid to waste with this burning heap of an album, and it's such a cool thing here. And final thoughts. This production is rough. The distortion on the vocals, which happens on several tracks here, is not it. It needs to be remixed, honestly, if it needs to be something that I will want to return to that much, but like the distortion is not it. And a lot of the builds show some real growth for the band, but I think they really reach their best stuff later. The synths here add virtually nothing, except for the points where the synths are underneath the guitars and they add just a little bit of extra space. They don't add that much. And apparently this album has themes of privacy in a way, but the lyrics don't seem to match that much. You definitely notice that Isis gets a lot more conceptual later on, but the thing is, this album is so well constructed. It sounds so interesting, and the songwriting is just amazing. I give this one a come to Brazil. You're probably wondering how I could like talk so much smack on an earlier release. It's because it only just gets better. And, following this, we have the little additional release, it's another EP. It's Signal 05, actually, which starts with the track Signal 05, Final Transmission. It's like the other Signals, except it's got some piano blurbs that sound kind of nice. It's really not that much different, but it's a little more ominous, I guess. And you can already tell the production is a little bit better. The next track we get is Divine Mother, The Tower Crumbles. It has a stupidly heavy syncopated riff and pretty tense verse structures. It's really interestingly written. It's got a mellow post-rock build for a long 5 minutes, which just builds so much tension. And the peak is just monumentally crushing. And you've actually got 2 vocalists here, which is very unique for Isis, and they are bellowing the whole time. And this goes into Beneath Below, the worst track on the EP here, because it's got a huge, weird post-industrial twist. It sounds cool. It's got some cool swelling synths, but it's very repetitive, and it really just doesn't do much. It kind of just feels like a moment that shouldn't happen. And this goes into the amazing Constructing Towers, which is a track that gets more and more dense as it goes along, which is a really interesting way to do another build. It's kind of the stuff they were doing before. And it's a track that's super simple and breathtaking as it just climbs and climbs this build. It's like Jacob's Ladder as it just screeches along. It's a really simple song that I'm really not justifying its song length with this short description here, but it is just a burning stream of just post-rock, which goes into Celestial, Signal Fills the Void, the Justin Broderick remix. It's got a really nice tom rhythm that builds everything super nicely, and it's awesome. It's before the simplistic guitar comes in, and it's really cool. And it's got the best ambient yet drony synths that they've had up to this point. It's probably the most purposeful synths maybe in their entire discography until their last 2 albums. And it turns very melancholic. It's really interesting because we're now getting an Isis look at what they're going to do on something in 2 albums from now, where you take a step back and it's something that has a decline after the build. And this is a very cool release here. I don't really need to rate it, except, it's good. It's Beneath Below blows, but like the rest of it's really solid. The production's great. For 30 minutes of an EP, it's awesome. And the last release of the day is the ever famous, ever influential, ever amazing Oceanic, which starts with the beginning and the end, which is a hell of an opening statement. And from the first note, we are in a new, melancholic, and beautifully produced sound. The lyrics portray this woman as an unobtainable ocean that you can't really grasp. But it's got like this motivational edge to it. It's like, to what end? It's really interesting, which kind of shows the concept of the album. It's going to be all about this woman. And this really awesome 3-chord riff builds up the bulk of the track here, and it sounds phenomenal. And it only gets cut by these explosions of energy. It is maybe the heaviest 4 on the floor structure ever. The drumming is simple, but it sounds great. The chorus's effect on the bass is gorgeous, and it's an amazing way to end the track. And this goes into the track of The Other, and it's all fit around this really unique bass melody, and it's really somber until it all erupts with Aaron's most crushing vocal delivery to date. And all this yelling gets followed by this just chugged out instrumental bridge that is so intense. It sounds like actual agony here, and this is followed by this really interesting 2-note syncopated riff that hits so well. Isis will have a lot of these really minimal, like 1, 2, 3 note riffs that they just syncopate a little bit, and they're not genty, but it's just post-metally in the way that it just amplifies itself. It's awesome. This goes into the track False Light, and it starts super intense with this screeching metallic guitar tone, and it goes into this rolling heavy sludge metal portion, which is just an awesome contrast. And it's awesome. It's got the most intense, gritty, chugging riff in 9/8, and it all comes down to this beautiful meditative section, which is just an amazing contrast. That is the thing this album adds a lot of, is the contrast, and it is a defining moment in their career so far to have such unique sounds. And this goes into the track Carry. You got some really cool thick ambient tones as this hi-hat comes in with this really interesting guitar, and the delay effects add a really nice sound to it, and the emotion here is just crushing. There is an insane build here, and after about 4 minutes there is an explosion of sound. It is brutally raw, and the riff that follows this has this legendary string skip that just makes it nothing short of legendary. It sounds so good. It is such a rush of a track. It's amazing. And then we get the track it's just Dash. It's titled, this is the title right here. And it's an interlude, but it's just these ocean field recordings that are really beautiful and atmospheric. It's actually not one I skip often. And this goes into the track Maritime, which is brief. It's just 3 minutes long. And it's such an interesting track because it sounds like Super Mario 64 keyboards with this really nice melodic guitar part. It's such an interesting sounding track. And it's like really laid back compared to everything else here. It sounds great. This goes into this immense 10-minute burner of a track known as Wait. You get a crushingly sad opening to this giant song here. You get the coolest ambient sounds with this really interesting tom and snare combo, and these really subtle female vocals that just say the same thing for the whole song. And the hi-hat is just getting hammered away at. It's so engaging. And it even pulls back right before a climax. And the melody drives down until it's just one note, which is crushingly simple. And it climaxes with the female vocals. It's like it never really ascends to this huge sludgy tone. It's actually one of the softer tracks. And this goes into one of my favorite tracks on the album, From Sinking, which has this just bleak atmosphere of night. It's like you're floating in the ocean at night, and that there are things glowing in the water, but it's just murky. And it is maybe the heaviest track. It sounds amazing after Wait. And the melodies are beautiful on top of it. There's a really sick minimalist sound to the whole thing. The melody chops and crunches into this really insane sludge zone, and it has a huge explosive ending. It is an utterly insane, furious track. It is in pure agony, and it goes into the bleakest daytime atmosphere of him, HYM. And it kicks off with Aaron's awesome and previously underutilized singing voice. It's got one of the best vocal melodies of his whole career. The melodies get so sad and bitter, it's actually crushing. This woman that has been just torn and mistreated, and he still can't get anywhere close to her. Just this ocean. The screams of the ocean that just wash him away are insane. It's really cool. And this album is so great. It's got like a Tool-style engaging, groovy presence with a brutal sadness that a lot of things don't really have. And this is one of Isis's best albums. I'm going to give it a bass and red pill. That's really something special. And it's really shows some territory that Isis is about to really do some amazing stuff with, as they are already doing. And it is absolutely some music you guys should be checking out. Isis is one of those bands that I can't get enough of. You shouldn't be able to get enough of because they're just so good. And I'll talk about them some other time with Panopticon, their next album. But that's the next time I make a video about this band. That's about it for today. I will continue this later, though, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Like and subscribe would be very much appreciated. Comments, questions, and concerns down below in the comments section. Social media is in the description of this video. If you want to go on my Instagram, my Twitter, go on my Discord page, and we can talk about music together. I love doing that with you guys, and that's about it. Hope you guys are doing well out there. Have a good day. Bye.